Welcome to Fantasy Focus. Today's podcast is presented by Geico. You can watch us every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube feeds, as well as the ESPN app. You can download Fantasy Focus wherever you get your podcast. We are on to Week 13. Field, Matthew, Stephania, and Daniel all here to recap last night's Monday night thriller for Matthew's Washington football team.
That's
all we're going to do.
It's a Victory Tuesday.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you know what? It's two things. I'm going to tell you what it is. It's Victory Tuesday, and it's Giving Tuesday. And a lot of people think giving, do you mean giving in the way that, you know, Washington gave it to Seattle, dominating time possession last night?
Right.
No, it's a charity component is what that means.
Okay. You want to tell us more about Giving? You want to tell us more about Giving Tuesday? Right at the top?
Now.
Yeah, let's do it now.
Let's do it right now, man.
You want to do it now?
Well, we're supposed to
about
be,
the good stuff off the top. Well, positivity for the show.
Listen, today is Giving Tuesday, a global day of giving. It's also the launch of ESPN's V Week. We can all be a part of something big today by supporting cancer research, which is needed now more than ever. If you're able, give now at v.org/donate. v.org/donate. 100% of what you give goes to cancer research. That's what I'm supposed to read. I will just say this off the top of my head. There's a lot of things this company does that I think are great, that I truly think, regardless of whether I work here or not, that I think are great. I don't think there's anything this company does that is better than V Week and what they do in support of the Jimmy V Foundation and their support of cancer research. I think that is the best thing this company does, and I don't think there's a close second, to be perfectly honest. And you say like 100% of donations go to research, and you're like, well, duh. And it's actually not true. But in terms of, it's true for ESPN, but what I mean is for the V Foundation, but I think people are like, why would you say that? And the reason is because there are a number of charities, and I'm not calling anyone specific out, but there are a number of charities, and if you study this online, you can go and Google this. There's been a lot of kind of research and some stories that have been told about this particular subject. But basically, a lot of times your donations to other charities go to salaries of the executives, that goes to overhead, that go to advertising so they can get more donations. Like there are a lot of charities where your money doesn't actually go to solving the problem that charity is designed to solve for. For the V Foundation, 100% of what you donate goes directly to researching and fighting cancer. The other stuff, the executive salaries, the overhead, the advertising, that is paid for by the Walt Disney Company. That is paid for elsewhere, not by you. Anyway, I'm just going to say, it's like, listen, everyone's at different financial standpoints. There are many great charities out there, but everyone in the world is in some way affected by cancer. It is the best thing this company does. If there is a way for you to give, I encourage you to do so. v.org.
Well said right there. And one more bookkeeping piece of announcement, or one more bookkeeping piece of information, is we mentioned yesterday, Fantasy Football Now this Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, not on ESPN2. We are going to be on Twitter, as you may watch us daily during this show. We're going to be on YouTube. You may watch us there. The ESPN app, the ESPN Fantasy Facebook page, all of the usual social mediums that you may use to watch this show, if you are a viewer of the show and not just a downloader or a listener, will be available 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. There is the college football playoff show. There is also NFL Countdown, and there is an F1 race. We do not have a linear TV home for this week, but find us for 1 week and 1 week only available on those various different platforms that I just mentioned.
So it's for those Twitter specifically, it's at ESPN. Like if you search at ESPN,
you'll see it right there.
It'll be the main ESPN Twitter handle.
Daniel's like a big music guy.
I'm asking.
I'll be right there. Yeah, Daniel's a big music guy. Like, there's like someone in town for like one night and one night only. Like you must make arrangements to go and see that performer, whoever it may be. Daniel,
right? That's
what this week is.
Usually
1 week, 1 day, and 1 day only.
Yeah.
What are you gonna say?
I was just going to say, when Daniel makes arrangements, usually like in that guy's garage.
Stop.
It's just like, hey, I heard you're in town. Yeah. Heard you're in town. So it's like literally in his motel room. Like, can you pull out your guitar and just play for me?
You could be in a garage. You could be in a man cave. You could be in a she shed. And you could watch on any one of these streaming
This is also
devices.
Very true. Do you have a she shed, Stephania?
I'm about to.
Oh!
Oh, Stephania, we just learned something.
Hey, what are we gonna put in the she shed? We gotta look. This is what I want to know. Now, do we need donations from the viewers about what's going in the she shed?
Yeah, we might need some ideas.
All right.
When I move into my house, I'm gonna
Fair
have a
enough.
she shed.
Why? Here's what it's gonna be. Can I tell you what's gonna be in the she shed? It's gonna be a little dog bed for Rico.
Okay. Yep.
And then 7,000 bottles of wine.
Wow.
That's literally the entire she shed.
What's she going to put inside the wine cellar then? Yeah, geez, she's already got that. That's full. That's the other 7,000.
That's the good wine.
The gifted wine.
Might invite you to share.
Yeah,
the gifted wine goes in the sea shed. All right, let's get to football as we have a lot of updates, and we're going to eventually recap Monday Night Football. I think we all have some thoughts on what took place last night.
I just want to say, if Monday Night Football was more exciting, we'd be leading the show with Monday Night Football. But it just, no offense, Matthew, it just wasn't a super exciing fancy game.
It wasn't a super exciting fantasy game. I was on pins and needles the entire game as a Washington fan. But yeah, it was not. It obviously was not. It was actually an ugly fantasy game. Although Antonio Gibson, but anyway, whatever. We'll get into whatever. We'll get into all
just a little bit. But let's get to some updates. And Stephania, we cannot go more than 1 week without a 49ers update. And this one is not so fun because he's their best player right now, at least offensively, Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, line him up wherever you want. Wide receiver, running back. Deebo Samuel does it all. Unfortunately, he left with a groin injury. Anyone who was watching the game might have seen him go to the ground. He said later after the game that he basically knew that his groin had tightened up and he didn't want it to get worse. Deebo getting smarter as he gets more mature in the game, knew that he had to come out. The good news after an MRI is that it appears to be a mild strain. And Kyle Shanahan said they expect him to miss 1 to 2 weeks. If you look at what their schedule is, the next 2 games for the 49ers are away. Seattle, Cincinnati. Then they're home at Atlanta. Then Tennessee, Houston, Rams. Some nice games for Deebo to come back for your fantasy playoffs. I will say this. The 49ers, when they've had players with soft tissue injuries, often bring them back at a home game on their grass. So I wouldn't be surprised if he misses the 2 weeks. It's not automatic, but keep that in mind.
So a couple thoughts here is that I'm not here to tell you that there is a wide receiver who steps up into the Deebo role, because what he was doing had literally never been done before. Back-to-back-to-back games with a rushing score. No wide receiver in the history of the NFL has ever had a rushing score in 3 straight games. I don't expect them to utilize Brandon Ayuk or Juwan Jennings or anybody else in that running back role like they did Deebo Samuel. I do think Brandon Ayuk stands to see a little bit of a bump. He's been really good recently anyway, so he'll be my highest ranked wide receiver. And I don't think it means even more work for Elijah Mitchell. The guy had 36 touches this past week, Matthew. Sure. There's only so much work to go around, so I wonder if perhaps the player who benefits, and I'm not sure it really moves the needle fantasy-wise, is actually Jeff Wilson Jr. Like, maybe he has a slightly more pronounced role, but I'm not sure anybody catapults in terms of overall value. Brandon Ayuk would be my best bet amongst the wide receivers, and then we'll see from there.
But yeah, it does feel like, I'm with you, Field. It feels like they sort of spread Deebo's touches around among all the players, but maybe, and again, I don't know that this moves the needle fantasy-wise because you're starting him regardless anyway, but maybe George Kittle gets a little bit more of a bump here. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like he hasn't been as involved in the passing game recently since his return.
This past week.
I mean, right, just this past
3
week.
straight games with a touchdown, and then this past week it was like, what happened?
Yeah, but in terms of massive target share, yeah, he's definitely been good fantasy-wise because of the touchdowns, but I'm just saying in terms of, like, this is a guy that used to be their leading receiver, you know, a leading pass catcher, I should say.
Right.
So, yeah, maybe he gets more of a bump in targets. He certainly was quiet this past week. But
let's get to Philadelphia, Stephania, and Matthew mentioned Miles Sanders' injury during the show yesterday, but we got more context on not just him, but also his quarterback, Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think they're coming out bumps and bruises. It sounds like more than anything else. Jalen Hurts dealing with soreness in his left ankle, but Nick Sirianni said he'll have a better idea of his status as of Wednesday. Didn't sound overly concerned. This was something he played the entire game. So I think this is one where you might see him limited during the week, but I'm not anticipating, at least as of right now, that this is going to cause him to miss a game. Miles Sanders, we mentioned the ankle yesterday, but it sounds like this is not as serious as the injury that kept him on IR. It's not clear even whether it's the same ankle or something else. Again, after the initial practice reports on Wednesday, we'll get a little bit more. Jordan Howard, just remember, he missed last week's game because of a knee injury. And again, not really much to update there. You got to see what he does in practice.
Potentially a Boston Scott Sunday against the Jets. We'll have more information on that as the week goes on and practice returns. Obviously, Jalen Hurts has been awesome, last week notwithstanding, but you really need him this week. We've got quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers on a bye. We've got some quarterbacks who have been struggling recently. Russell Wilson. We'll talk about you in just a few minutes. Some of these guys that have been lock-it-in starters have not necessarily produced the kind of results you'd be looking for. We'll see if Hurts gives it a go on Sunday. Gardner Minshew, the next man up, if not.
Yeah, and it is interesting. Like it's a game that the Eagles need, but they might feel pretty good against the Jets. And the other concern is that if Hurts can go, but is he more limited in his running? Do they try not to do they do less designed runs because the ankle's a little bit tender? Interestingly, if Jordan Howard, and I think that's just an important storyline to monitor, because if Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders were to miss this game, you mentioned Boston Scott. I mean, Boston Scott, took over for that backfield once Miles Sanders left in the fourth quarter with that ankle against the Jets. Like, Boston Scott, top 20 play this week.
Sure.
So just as everyone's talking about Alexander Madison and Jamal Williams, and we'll get into all the names in a little bit in terms of waiver wire, but I do think Boston Scott, an underrated waiver grab this week if you miss out on sort of the big ticket guys.
Too bad they're not playing against the Giants, where he has scored so many of his 11 career touchdowns. Stephania, my note here says all of the Cowboys, because it feels like seriously almost all of them are dealing with something right now.
Well, what they're all dealing with is constraints around their practice this week heading into a Thursday game, given the COVID situation. They have multiple staff members. We've already heard Mike McCarthy will not be coaching this game. It will be Dan Quinn, who serves as the head coach. Mike McCarthy tested positive for COVID-19. Their strength and conditioning staff is basically out with the virus. So what they're doing right now is they're basically coming into practice and leaving the players who are available to come into practice, and they are not doing their weight workouts. They're just trying to get through the week. But the player that we care the most about from a fantasy perspective is Zeke, and it's not for the COVID issues, but it's because of a knee that's been somewhat problematic since he injured it originally the first week of October, had what they called at the time a knee contusion. It's been giving him some trouble off and on. And the main issue is, he can feel good. He can run. If you watch the games, you can see that he has some very good moments. But as the game goes on, if he gets stiff, and some of that has to do with like when you take breaks, you sit, the knee gets stiff after he takes a big hit, then it becomes more problematic for him as the game goes on. And you've seen Tony Pollard elevate in those cases. We had heard that Zeke might sit out. My understanding is that that is not the case. Zeke has indicated that the team has not asked him to rest, and he is a team guy. He is going to be out there. Might it mean more work for Tony Pollard? It might, particularly if it stiffens up on him during the game. So I expect Zeke to play on Thursday, but that workload share, particularly on the runs, might go more to Tony Pollard.
And it's interesting, Field, because they play the Saints, which is, usually one of the best run defenses in the NFL. So if you've got Zeke at, less than 100% and less than 100% of a workload in a tough matchup, I can't imagine you have two better options. You're probably starting him anyway, but certainly you would lower expectations here. The one thing I will say about Ezekiel Elliott, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Stephania, but I believe that in his career, he's missed one game due to injury. I think only one. When you think about he was suspended for 6 games, but like he's missed one game due to injury in his career, despite the fact this is a guy that always leads the NFL in terms of total number of touches and, takes a lot of hits. So anyway, looks like at least trending in the right direction for him to play Thursday.
And by the way, I was thinking the same thought with the Eagles earlier and the Cowboys as applies to them, is that all these teams, like if you want to think about the big picture, that's good on principle. Problem is the NFL is so clustered right now. Who has wiggle room? Not a single team right now has significant wiggle room where they can say, hey, you know what? Like NBD, if we don't have our starting quarterback against the Jets, like, hold on, the Jets have beaten the Titans and also more. Who's it recently they just got too? And the Bengals, right? Like two teams that are 8-4 and 7-4 in the AFC. Like, this is not the year where you can take teams lightly in the NFL. The Cowboys hope to have Zeke on Thursday night. The Jaguars most likely will not have their acquired recently tight end Dan Arnold. Stephania, what happened to him?
He suffered a knee injury. We knew it was going to be a multi-week injury from the sounds of it, but Urban Meyer confirming that he's going on injured reserve. And you have to look, multi-week knee injury, injured reserve, it might not be enough time. We've seen players who had to extend beyond the recovery window from an injury. And I think that could be the case here with Dan Arnold, which then makes you wonder now with 6 weeks left, if the recovery extends out to 5 or 6 weeks, we might not see him again this year.
Another tight end who is not available that is usable. Maybe the Jaguars will take this opportunity to get Laviska Shenault some handoffs, which they mentioned last week. How many did he have on Sunday? How many did he have, Stephania? How many? Just guess. He had 0. 0 on Sunday, which I get it. Why? Here's my thing.
Why?
It's like, why even introduce it? Like, why bring it up?
Why mention
throw it into the ether, and then all of a sudden don't use it?
Why make me take a chance in my fantasy?
Yeah, well, and also like, why is it important to anybody, right? Like, why would you bring it up and then like, hey, here's some things we need to do better, and then not do it? It just things are backwards right now in a lot of ways down there in Jacksonville.
Such a weird statement from future Oklahoma coach Urban Meyer.
Oklahoma, I thought Notre Dame.
Think on Notre Dame? Think he's going to Notre Dame?
Isn't that the job everyone wants to connect into?
Yeah.
That was like
I know
a
everyone
dream
wants him to
job.
Everyone wants him to Notre Dame. I just sort of feel like Notre Dame's so squeaky clean. I feels like I don't know. Feels like he's more of a fit in Oklahoma. That's all I'll say. I'm going to get in trouble
Let's
here.
move along here then. I'm going to save you from yourself.
Save him from himself.
Here's what I want. Hey, real quickly, back to the Jaguars. I just want to say here that James O'Shaughnessy, shout out to my friend Ben Gretsch who noted this, but James O'Shaughnessy, no, 82% ran 82% of the routes. Like after Dan Arnold went down, like I don't know. We were in a tight end desperate era, and the Jaguars have seemed to target the tight end in that offense, and so
I know.
Anyway,
it's like muscle memory for
I
you,
know,
right? It's like a guy who like
an obscure tight end. I know. What do you want
Heaven
from me?
forbid they just throw the ball to LaVisca Chenault for
They don't
like
like
a
him.
handful of
I know.
times a game.
Yeah. Oh
Too
man.
much to ask. Apparently, it is.
Let's move forward. Speaking of an obscure tight end / quarterback, Taysom Hill, Stephania. This is important. We'll get to another factor, another dynamic in a second. But health-wise, where is Taysom Hill at?
Well, he's practicing, and that's a good sign. He's had a foot injury. You may recall that he was active as an emergency quarterback, but not active as a running back. And there was some confusion. And understandably, it's a question. People are like, well, if he's healthy enough to do one, why wouldn't he be healthy enough for another? Potentially, as an emergency quarterback, you could go in and have to play the whole game. But the thought is, well, you might be constrained as a quarterback if you are limited with a foot issue. It's been reported that he's dealing with a plantar fascia injury. It's very painful on the bottom of your foot. And you could see how that would be problematic for the planting and cutting of a running back. And if you're just basically asked to stand in the pocket, you could maybe get through it. This week sounds like he is improving, doing more in practice. Again, they're on a different structure this week because the game is Thursday. We should have a really good idea by this afternoon. Follow the Saints reporters as they're getting the information from the team. The official game status injury report will be out tomorrow, but I think there's a good chance that we could see Taysom Hill playing quarterback this week.
And
So,
Field
yeah,
Yates,
let's
I'll ask
talk
you.
about that then.
I'll ask you that if Taysom Hill is the starting quarterback of the Saints, if we find that out prior to putting in waivers, where does he rank for you among your quarterback pickups this week?
The number one, really the only one that I think is a real legitimate, can grab him and utilize him for multiple weeks going forward and feel pretty confident about. You could pick up a guy like Taylor Heineke, right, who like played okay, like for the most part last night, but did you see this stat? We'll get back to Taysom Hill in a second. Like, I want to say that like the average air yards last night was like 2.8 for Taylor Heineke. He played well, by the way, but like basically they are very much like they are dink and dunk in the moment, which that's not a player indictment. Like sometimes, like, by the way, like the scheme is good. Like they won, right? Like I don't care. Like I don't care if you have a 10.5 yards per attempt or air yards per attempt. Like if you're not winning, you're not playing good football. Like who gives a crud? Like right now, Seattle probably could stand to have some smarter offensive approaches. But anyways, I digress. Back to Taysom Hill, my number one quarterback waiver wire ad by far this week. And I know that we've talked about this a few times and recently as well, when it seemed like there was a chance he would become a starter for New Orleans. But if you look all the way back to last year when he started for 4 games in place of Drew Brees, 3 of those 4 games he threw for at least 230 yards. The 4th game was that game against the Broncos, which incidentally enough was 1 year ago yesterday. Why is that game notable? Kendall Hinton was the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos. He was, of course, a practice squad wide receiver. It was one of those games where like the Saints barely had to touch the football and they were already bound to win. It was a weird, almost throw it out kind of game. But in those 4 games, Taysom Hill also had 39 rushing attempts and 4 rushing touchdowns. There's legitimate 20-point upside any game in which Taysom Hill is the starter. Not only is he a waiver wire ad for me this week, I've got him right around my top 10 for quarterbacks for week 13, Daniel.
Yeah, I just want to ask, on our note, it just says Taysom Hill, and there's nothing underneath it. And you just listed like 40 stats. And I'm just curious how you keep all those things in your brain.
Well,
you said last year he had what? What did he have?
39 carries in 4 starts.
How do you, like, I just want to be Field Yates.
No, you don't, because here's the thing. If it's important information, I lack it. You want to ask me about like things that are actually useful? I got nothing.
Yeah.
If you want completely obscure stuff, like where did Taysom Hill go to college? I got you.
Field, I need help with my plumbing.
Not a chance, Daniel.
No?
You know this. You like I like, I'll try to pull a nail out of the wall. I'll have to call you up and be like, Daniel, can you please get this nail out of my wall? He's like, have you tried pulling it? I'm like,
I
Not yet.
actually was wondering this morning. Field has a photographic memory. Do you have a photographic memory?
I don't know. I just think it's random
That's
stuff.
a great,
not
you know what?
important
That's
stuff.
actually a great question, Stephania, because there are people that do have
Right.
like legitimate, have you like,
I know a couple orthopedic surgeons who do. They can look at a picture and that they know it, which is a great skill to have if you're operating on someone.
well, and there's
But
been.
I have no such thing but I do have a weird Rolodex for injuries, so I
Yeah.
can recall somebody did this 4 years ago at this game, but
I feel like a lot of coaches have
no
it. You know?
photographic memory.
Well, we've seen all the Sean McVay stuff, where
Yeah.
where he's done that, and I don't know if you've ever seen an interview with the actress Mary Lou Henner. She was
Oh,
on Taxi and everything, but
That's
she has
a
this
different thing.
great,
That's a
like
different thing.
she has great, you'll be like, oh hey, Mary
That's
Lou,
a different thing.
What did
There's
you wear in
No,
1978?
there's a name for
and
that.
she's like,
There's people who remember every single event, every single day. They can, if you ask them what day of the week was it on, January
right.
3rd, 1989, they can tell you.
right.
That's
She has
different.
some photograph. There's anyway. I don't have any of that. I don't even remember what I talked about 10 minutes ago.
What's memory?
Did we?
I believe it was Randall Cobb, right?
It might have been.
Okay, let's ask
It might
Stephania
have
more
been,
about
but anyway,
Randall Cobb.
but
Well done.
But anyway, the only thing I would say, Field, just quickly on that, and I know we're going to get more into waivers quickly here in a little bit, but I would say that if you needed a quarterback for 1 week only, like I'm just trying to replace Aaron Rodgers kind of thing,
Yep.
Carson Wentz for me, who plays Houston this week, I would prefer him over Hill for this 1 week.
Yeah.
But season long, I'm with you on Hill.
I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous. Yeah, that's
I'll
good.
do a
That's a good
board
one.
bet.
For 1 week. I agree. It's been a while. Here's the reason why I'm a little bit nervous about Carson Wentz.
Sure.
If you go back to the first time with the Texans, it's just like we'll just run over you for 300 yards, right?
Right.
Like I think he threw the ball some ridiculous amount of times, like 11 times or something that last time
Right.
they
It could
played
be a
Houston,
Jonathan. It could be a
right?
Jonathan
So
Taylor 5
that's my
touchdown
fear.
game.
But yeah, I'll make a board bet. I say so. Let's assume he starts. I say Taysom Hill outscores Carson Wentz in Week 13.
I say Carson Wentz outscores Taysom Hill in Week 13. Put it on the board.
Put it on the board.
By the way, quick note from Kevin Pulsifer, who was
Sure.
our researcher for Fantasy Football Now, and just a quick. Also a listener of the show,
Yes.
obviously.
Yeah.
But he just texted and said hyperthymesia. That's what it's called.
That's what it's called.
Andre Agassi had that, right?
No.
For the photographic memory.
Oh, maybe.
Andre Agassi, did he?
Yeah, I've read his book. It's like he can literally remember.
I hate you. Everything about you.
No,
Carson
he-
Wentz was 11 for 20 , by the way. So
Okay,
we had
but still 11 completions. I'm
not
sorry,
11.
still.
Sorry,
But
you
yeah,
only got
low
half of the
number.
numbers right, Field.
Yeah. Anyways,
Freaking
I think
idiot.
Andre Agassi can remember every point of his career. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, no,
but
I
that's
think I
close to
saw
it.
an interview with him about that. You're right, Field.
Randall Cobb,
Crazy.
Stephania.
By the way,
just to-
Kevin Pulsifer did not remember that. He looked that up. He looked that name up.
Okay,
He's
well,
a researcher.
Stephania, he's also a great bracketologist. Stephania, Randall Cobb was playing well for the Packers on Sunday, got banged up. What's going on there?
Yeah, came out with a groin injury, missed most of the second half. They're on a bye this week,
Mm-hmm.
so you are not going to get much update. This is just sort of something to file away, as in we don't know how much time this could potentially cost him.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that one. He hasn't been a real fantasy factor this year, but something to keep an eye. He's been certainly very clutch for them in a couple of key moments. We're going to discuss Monday Night Football in just a minute, but before we do you own or rent your home? Sure you do.
Yeah.
And I bet it can be hard work, but it's easy. Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
Football and basketball season is back, and best of all, the safe return of live events means you can actually be there to see all the action with Vivid Seats. From seats on the 50-yard line to a bird's eye view to parking passes, being there is all that matters. And get this, with Vivid Seats Rewards, you can earn rewards like free tickets. All you have to do is collect stamps, redeem, and repeat. It's that easy. So grab your tickets today and cheer on your favorite team from the stands. Events for every fan. Visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats. Experience it live.
We are back, and let's get into Monday Night Football. And, of course, Matthew's Washington football team wins 17-15. This was the game that seemingly would never end. And
I lost years off my life.
You don't
on
have
this
You don't have
game.
many left.
I
Yeah, I was going to
know.
say, this is a problem.
I know. If I don't make it to the end of the year, you guys know what caused it.
Is it really worth it?
No. I have young kids. I gotta survive for, I gotta get them through high school, I think, right? I got 8 more years. I gotta hang around for at least 8 more years.
We'll go.
I don't know if I can take this.
Let's go bad to good then. So we'll get the bad stuff out of the way. Stephania and I can talk about it. Then you can just chime in once your Washington football team talk starts. But Seattle last night.
Brutal.
All right. If you told me that the 3 best players in my offense were Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, I would say to you, any game in which we fail to score 24 points is exactly that, a failure, right? I mean, this is Russell freaking Wilson.
Or is
DK Metcalf. It may not be. But let's talk about Russell Wilson. He ends up with 19.5 fantasy points last night, 20 for 31, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. Much of that comes late. On the final drive, he ends up throwing a touchdown pass to Freddie Swaim on that drive. It was, 96-yard drive? Like, it was basically that. It was all, it's not garbage time because they almost won the game, or they almost tied the game, I should say. But it was 58 minutes of irrelevance from Russell Wilson. And Stephania, I got to ask you, convince me something is not wrong with Russell Wilson's finger still.
I can't, but I think it's complicated. I will say this. He started off, he completed past Tyler Lockett early that made me think, okay, maybe this week is going to be better for Russell Wilson. I thought he started off looking okay, but definitely got worse as the game went on. And there was a sense to me that he is trying to overcompensate. So I don't know how bad the finger is. Every time he's been asked, he denies that he has discomfort. Every time you get asked, he denies that the finger is a problem. But we're seeing him with an accuracy deficiency that is uncharacteristic for him. Sailing balls, and he's also not spotting players. You don't know if that's just the missed time, but I feel like, in my sense, and this is just my gut watching him field, you might feel differently, but I feel like he's trying to salvage things. He's trying to prove, like, I can still get the ball down the field, only he throws it out of the end zone. It's like he's trying to show that he can do these things, like he's trying to compensate in some way. And, his finger is functional. He's medically cleared. He denies it's an issue. I will tell you this. I talked to Alex Smith about this when Russell was out on IR, because I wanted to know from a quarterback's perspective just how much a third finger was. And he's like, for control of the ball, it's probably the most important. And we were talking about the potential for Russell to return early. And he's like, I'd be nervous about doing it just because this is such a key finger for you. And this is your career going forward. You really want to make sure you protect it. So I think we're seeing some of that play out. He's just not himself.
It looks, some of it, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
No, so I don't know if it's pride, but I don't know if it's the public adulation that you incur when you go on this ferocious rehab tour, and every national reporter is telling us about how I'm rehabbing 19 hours a day and, waking up in the middle of the sleep like a mother nursing a baby to go get rehab done on my finger, and the doctor's saying it's the most miraculous rehab of all time. But I wonder if his pride got in his own way here, Matthew. I'm not saying that Geno Smith was any great shakes, right? But like Russell Wilson had, at least off of memory, like 3 throws last night where the receiver was wide open. And I'm not talking like 50 yards down the field wide open. I'm talking like Gerald Everett running a 5-yard speed out, and Russ sails one like he's trying to hit the first person in the front row of the stands on the sideline.
Right.
He looks off. This is Russell Wilson, one of the most accurate and gifted passers ever. He does not look right anymore.
He doesn't look right, but it's not just physical. It's also mental. Stephania, sort of referenced it as well. They were wide open, and the broadcast did a good job, I thought, of pointing this out in terms of like, look at this guy in the middle of the field. He's wide open. Look at the, even on the interception on the 2-point conversion, if you go back and watch that play, DK Metcalf is sprinting across with his hand open wide. And normally if Russ throws that to the right, normal Russ throws that to the right, DK Metcalf likely comes down with it, assuming it's a good throw, right? Instead, he throws it into what he thought was single coverage. It was ultimately double coverage. Fuller pulled back and makes the interception of the 2-point conversion to seal the win for Washington. But he missed DK on that throw. And so I think some of it's mental. I think some of it is physical. I think some of it isn't on him. Russell was under pressure a lot last night, you know, and they could not do anything in the run game. So it was all on them. You know what I mean? It felt like Russell was, and listen, they have a limited, you know, to your point, like, you know, it was interesting. Like at the top of the broadcast, Louis Riddick said something to the effect of like, you know, they were talking about Gerald Everett and like, they expect him to be involved a lot tonight. And I'm like, they expect Gerald Everett to be involved a lot tonight? Like, and maybe they felt like, hey, Washington's going to take away DK Metcalf because they did bracket him a decent amount and like they did a good job there. But, I don't know. Like, I think there's just a lot that's wrong in Seattle. And I think Russell's finger is a piece of it. I don't think it's all of it.
They had 5 straight 3-and-outs at one point last night, which was tied for the longest streak in the NFL this season with themselves all the way back in week 4. Like they are a broken offense right now.
Is that he is we've always valued Russell Wilson's rushing ability. And part of that has been his ability to escape when he's under pressure. And yes, Matthew, he was definitely under pressure. He's harassed a lot. But did you see, like, one time he just got sandwiched. Like, he got taken down before he even got back to the line of scrimmage. And I was like, that's not Russell Wilson moving. And that has nothing to do with his hand. But he's not moving like he used to.
By the way, but credit to the Washington defensive line without Chase Young, you know, getting real good pressure. I mean, the defense, which has been much maligned for much of the season, they played well. They played by me, especially all of us, everyone, anyone that watches football.
Come on, let me rib Matthew.
And by the way, well deserved, malignment. But I will tell you, like, they stepped up and like the defense won that game because the offense couldn't get anything going for much of it. Despite dominating time possession, Washington just didn't put points on the board. It's really interesting here. Last thing on Russell Wilson. 2 last things on Russell Wilson. First off, he was on the hate list, and I was looking like a genius up until that last drive. Winds up with 19.5 fantasy points.
What are you
You're happy? What are you going to do? Happy about that? His player prop was 246 yards. He finished with 247. So again, if you took the under, like, I don't know, someone like I did, you were feeling good up until literally like 30 seconds to go. One thing I will say here is that I still don't love him this week against San Francisco.
That's the important part. Let's table
Pivot
it for
to
now
fantasy.
to like for going forward, but cross Russell Wilson off of the absolute must-start list for quarterbacks.
Yeah.
It's just a fact right now. Like, just go look at the past 4 games. He has not been the quarterback that we drafted to be a superstar this season. We got to move. What do you got, Daniel?
We got to keep going. But does DK Metcalf fall into that bucket?
That's where we're going right now. I mean, yeah. So let's ignore the running backs for Seattle. Here's a disclaimer on them. They all stink. None of them are good in fantasy football. Okay, DK Metcalf. What the heck? What the freaking heck? He did not have a catch until the final drive of last night. He didn't have a target in the first half. This is one of the most physically imposing wide receivers in the NFL. One of the most physically imposing we have ever seen. This is a player who lit the NFL on fire last year. There was 0 answer for DK Metcalf. There was no stopping him last season. And yet, he had 1 catch for 13 yards last night, Matthew.
And I'm not convinced it was a catch. By the way, I don't think he got both feet down. We only saw one thing. It looked like he might have only dragged 1 foot. I want to see a replay on that one.
He was wide receiver 91, Matthew.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to, I can't even offer fantasy advice on this anymore right for the moment. All I'm going to say is just here's my fantasy advice. Like, I have him. I'm going to be starting this week, and I'm playing against another league, and I'm going to be fearful of playing against him in another league. But here's come on, Seattle. If the number of targets DK has in a game is not at minimum 8, probably more like 10, I just feel like we're doing things wrong. Mm-hmm. They just are. And
the Seattle offense is broken. I mean, it really is. I mean, Lockett has a decent game on a couple of big catches, one broken coverage basically, but there's not a lot. I don't know that there is a must start in the Seattle offense. You are likely starting Lockett. I don't know that you probably have to start Metcalf, but there's no player on Seattle where you're like, I don't care about the matchup. I'm not looking at any of my other options. They're automatically in my lineup. I don't think you can say that with any of these guys until you see it on the field. It's just been too bad for too long.
Let's move forward to the Washington side. Taylor Heineke, business-like effort last night, just 11.2 fantasy points, but he completed 27 of 35 passes. Solid, not spectacular, but solid for him.
He took what the defense gave them. Just as a Washington fan, I was happy to see that. Good.
Yep.
Make a profit. The stuff Peyton Manning talks about on Manningcast all the time, like can't go broke making a profit. There you go.
Yep, well said right there.
Yep.
But Antonio Gibson was the story for them last night offensively. Antonio Gibson over the past 2 weeks has 72 rushes. He has been, or 72 total touches. He has been unbelievable. In terms of workload recently. So he had 146 yards last night. Perhaps the most important part, though, is he had 7 catches, too. Like, I think they went for like 30 total yards, but who cares? Like, 70 catches is good. He is turning the corner, looking really, really good right now. Seems to be a kind of guy that you can start with more confidence at the moment, and that might only amplify Stephania if his backfield mate, J.D. McKissic, is unavailable this week. He left the game on a cart. It was a scary moment there.
Yeah, I know. J.D. McKissic is really well liked. He is considered like a do-everything back for them. He's obviously been the focal point for them so far this season, but still waiting to hear more updates on what the status of J.D. McKissic will be. A lot of Washington players went in and out of the game last night. Even Antonio Gibson had a scare of his own, but J.D. McKissic, obviously, we're going to watch and wait for
his agent
further reporting.
Took to Twitter last night and said he's all good. So, we'll see what that means, right? But, I think people were fearing something significant right away. Hopefully he avoided anything significant. More information tomorrow. I believe the Washington football team practice week resumes at that time.
Yeah, and to Stephania's point, he's a beloved guy in that locker room.
He's
in addition to being a very good player, he's just a big glue guy, just a guy that is really liked. Yeah, and not only so J.D. McKissic goes down, Jared Patterson would likely be the next man up if McKissic were to miss any time. Remember, they're traveling to Las Vegas, short week. They play the Raiders on Sunday.
Much different player, though. Much different, obviously.
Much different, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I would agree with you that I think you'd see more Antonio Gibson passing game usage, and maybe you see more Patterson between the tackles because they want to, try to limit, how many touches can Gibson take. But that would be the thing. They're down to their 4th string center, as was noted. Crazy. They lost their kicker last night. Like, when I tell you that was
tried to make a tackle.
Nothing good comes from hustling. How many times we got to say it? Nothing good comes from hustling, Joey Sly.
Right, and there'll be a change there. As Ron Rivera said after the game, it'll be at least 3 weeks for Joey Sly because of that hamstring injury. Terry McLaurin, 4 catches, 51 yards. Obviously a really, really good player. Just not a lot of volume right now and nothing down the field last night for them for the most part. And Logan Thomas, Ron Rivera said on ESPN before the game on our broadcast, pitch count for him last night. Didn't seem like one to me, and he nearly had a touchdown, by the way. It was a touchdown.
No, he had a touchdown.
He had a touchdown. I'm with you. I agree. It was a touchdown.
Ridiculous.
But,
here's, I just want to 10 seconds on this rant here. All I'm going to say is that the whole thing is it's supposed to be clear and obvious to overturn. When it takes that long to view it, it's not clear and obvious. If they had called it incomplete on the field, okay, fine, call it incomplete. But when you call it a touchdown, you can't overturn it because it's clear and obvious, because it ain't clear and obvious, because it took you 3 minutes to figure it out. And then, by the way, I've seen the replay a million times. Wasn't clear and obvious. It's allowed to touch the ground if he still has control. His hand was under the ball. It's absolutely outrageous. It's ridiculous. It's baloney. It's malarkey. It's malfeasance. It's skullduggery. And Washington got jobbed there. I'm glad they won. They should have won. I can't believe they had to go to a second. They had to go to a second onside kick. Like, that game took years off my life.
For the record, it was a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black when you're like, it took 6 minutes to do this. And you're like, I need 10 seconds. I need 10 seconds to rant. And that was like 48.
It's whatever.
Just saying.
48?
48 seconds.
By the way, I would have predicted 2 minutes.
I probably would.
You know what?
I hit the under. Tired. You got a little tired.
I hit the under.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. You're faded.
Logan Thomas does play a bunch of snaps, 3 catches, 6 targets, 31 yards. We're going to come back and talk about both the Survivor League and also waivers in just a moment. Before we do that, Daniel, everyone likes shopping online.
Yep.
But searching for coupon codes, kind of a bummer. So make saving online a breeze with Capital One Shopping. Capital One Shopping is a free tool that instantly searches for available coupon codes and automatically applies them at checkout. Just download Capital One Shopping to your computer and let it do the work for you. So easy, and you don't even need a Capital One card to use it. Capital One Shopping, it's kind of genius. What's in your wallet? Saving and available coupons apply. Very.
This episode is also brought to you by Captain Morgan. NFL fans know with the season underway, you got to have the right players for all 60 minutes in order to bring that spark. And sometimes you got to sub in someone to switch things up. Well, same thing goes for that drink in your hand on game day. So if you're looking to sub in something more refreshing, pour yourself a delicious, crisp Captain Morgan Original Spiced Rum and Ginger. Sub in the Captain. Captain Morgan, the official spiced rum of the NFL. Visit CaptainMorgan.com to find Captain near you. Drink responsibly. Captain Morgan Rum Company, New York, New York.
All righty, Daniel.
Oh, this is a tough one. This is a tough one.
This is a tough one. One of our favorite people in the world, Kyle Soppe, is now a former member of the Survivor League.
Kyle Soppe needed negative 5.3 points from Terry McLaurin last night in order to survive. Yeah. That did not happen.
Right.
So we are going to say that thirsty Kyle shall thirst no more as he returns to the dirt from whence he came.
He's very thirsty. He's thirsty for a victory. He's thirsty to get back in the league. Can't, though, because he's done.
Yeah.
He's donezo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here are tabs. There you are. There you are. What happened, Thirsty Kyle? What happened to your team?
Let me tell you. Can I say it real quick?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Thirsty Kyle's players that will be returning to free agency as a part of the Survivor League are Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Christian McCaffrey, out for the year, Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase, Darren Waller, and Mark Andrews. He had a unbelievable team, but they were all hurt this week.
Yeah, he had the Stephania Bell team.
Yeah.
Basically, he had the curse of Stephania Bell. I think Stephania looked at his team once, and then boom, it all happened. And so yet another team with Patrick Mahomes goes down.
Again,
it's unbelievable.
Him in this league. I haven't been another one.
And
not Survivor.
I mean, yeah, it was a great team, and just everyone got hurt. Here's what's crazy.
Sorry, Kyle.
As great as your team was, Kyle,
Yeah.
this was over before Sunday Night Football.
Oh, yeah.
You finished 7th. Anything would you like to say parting and with parting words?
No, I mean, Stephania touched on it. I had all the injuries, but it was adding Mahomes for a bye week that did me in. That's 5 times he's been cut loose. He's going to end up on the winning team. That's just the way this works.
We'll find out.
We will see. We are down to 6 teams, and the way the league works is that once we get to the final 4, those 4 teams will compete for the rest of the season, and that over that period of time, whatever team has the most fantasy points over that will be declared the champion. So only 2 more teams to be chopped. We are down to 6. Stephania and I both still alive, as is Al Zeidenfeld, among members of the 06010 that the public is familiar with.
Yeah, so one of the guys that we mentioned, Matthew, was Dalvin Cook, who Kyle had on his team. Obviously, we're going to jump into waivers here, but I want to start with Stephania, if you don't mind, asking about Dalvin Cook before we talk about Alexander Mattison.
Yeah, well, we saw him leave, and it was really it was scary. It was scary how he went down. He was clearly in a lot of pain and kind of reaching over to the side. There are reports that he dislocated his left shoulder. Mike Zimmer, when asked about it originally, would not confirm the diagnosis, was calling him day-to-day. Adam Schefter later reported that he's expected to miss the next 2 games. You know, the Vikings play on a Sunday, and then they follow that with a Thursday game. So that would be a quick return for 2 weeks. They follow the Thursday game with a Monday night game. So it sounds like the team is hopeful to have him back in that 3rd week. But they've been optimistic before, and it hasn't always worked out as far as the timing. Dalvin Cook has had problems with his shoulder in the past. If you look back at his history, it's been an issue for him previously. So let's hope that he has a good recovery and hope that we see him again in a few weeks.
All right, Matthew, I'm going to throw it to you then to lead the waiver wire segment like you usually do here on Tuesdays.
So, Field Minister Yates, you write, of course, the free agent finds column on ESPN.com. Is it up now, or will it be up soon?
It is up. Has been up since Monday afternoon, and we can dive right into it.
Fantastic. Who is your number 1 pick?
Yeah, it's not even close. It's Alexander Mattison, who is going to step into that role behind Dalvin Cook, and Stephania just gave you a sense of the possible timeline. Maybe it's 2 games, maybe it's longer. But Dalvin Cook has missed 2 games earlier this season. What did Alexander Mattison do in each of those 2 games? He had up over 20 rushing attempts in each of those games. He had over 100 rushing yards in each of those games. One of those games, he had 7 catches and a touchdown. He has been basically a top 5 running back in each of those opportunities to fill in for Dalvin Cook. He plays the Lions on Sunday. My Week 13 running back rankings will be up soon if they are not already. I believe I have him as RB4, Matthew. I know that his numbers over the course of the year as sort of the fill-in back don't look great. I think he's at 3.8 yards per carry. But the volume is so significant. They get him involved in the passing game, and the chance for a touchdown on Sunday is too good to ignore.
Totally agree. He's playing the Lions on Sunday. I think he's a locked-in top 5 guy for for honestly as long as Dalvin Cook is out. He's somehow shockingly still available in over 75% of ESPN leagues. He should have been rostered in 100% of leagues. We've talked about this, and let this week be a lesson to you that if you manage to survive, like if you have Joe Mixon, you need Samaje Perine on your team, right? I mean, again, we've talked about it when we saw when Aaron Jones went down, and if you had A.J. Dillon, now Cook with Alexander Mattison. If Ezekiel Elliott misses time, you're going to be happy that you have Tony Pollard on your team. Like, especially as we're getting into the stretch run here and heading to the playoffs, when there is a clear and obvious insurance running back for your guy, make sure you roster him before you need to roster him. Speaking of Daniels Lions, Stephania, DeAndre Swift. What do we know about him?
Yeah, he left in the second quarter. The team called it a shoulder sprain. I said this yesterday. It's a very... sometimes we call this garbage terms because it's so generic. It doesn't really help you in terms of a specific diagnosis. But the Lions have never really been a team that's offered a lot of detail when it comes to injuries. Dan Campbell gave the closest thing to a hint that we ever see from the Lions, saying it would be hard to see DeAndre Swift being able to play this week against the Vikings. So this is a team that's had DeAndre Swift on the injury report as questionable more often than not, and he's been playing very, very well, that from a groin injury from preseason. But this one looks like it will force him to be sidelined.
And I have no information on this, but let's just take a big step back and think about where we're at in the season. It's week 13, right? This is a team that's 0-10-1 right now. DeAndre Swift is one of the few players that we know is a big part of their future going forward on this roster, especially on offense. Got to be smart with this. In the meantime, we know who else is going to step up into that role behind DeAndre Swift. It's Jamal Williams, who's available in about 55% of leagues on ESPN. He had 15 carries this past week. He's an adept pass catcher earlier on this year. Both of these guys were catching a ton of passes. I think Williams is probably like a top 15 or so option until, or perhaps unless, DeAndre Swift returns at some point this season. Talented guy, not as talented as DeAndre Swift, but certainly a good veteran presence, an energy guy as well. You know he'll be a big part of however this Lions offense looks over the next, let's call it, few weeks until DeAndre Swift returns. So a big opportunity here for Jamal Williams.
Yeah, nice player here, and I don't think that Minnesota scares you as a run defense either. Certainly, I mean, we just saw San Francisco run all over them. Their defense is banged up as well. It is sad, Stephania, when we have so many big-name running backs that get injured. And yesterday, we had a friend of the pod. We got some bad news about a friend of the podcast.
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey, who we really did not know was dealing with anything of significance. This is one where the team never reported it officially during the game. He is done for the year. He's on injured reserve. That's what his status is. They made a decision after some follow-up yesterday, follow-up evaluation, et cetera, to place him on IR and he'd be done for the season. I do want to point out something, because I just think this is important to remember. People may wonder why. It's hard to get information, right? We talk about this all the time. But it is part of the NFL's media policy. That's why we have injury reports that come out that we reference all the time. And that's why teams issue reports during the game with a player as being questionable to return, ruled out for the game, et cetera. And I just want to read you from the rule book. As endorsed by the NFL Competition Committee, in-game injury announcements to the media must be specific to a body part, accurate, and updated as warranted, including any changes in the player's status for the rest of the game if it changes from the initial report. Christian McCaffrey should have been reported as questionable to return with an ankle injury. So that being said, what we were told was that after the game, he had rolled his ankle. They didn't think it was serious. X-rays were negative. And yes, there's always more detail that comes out in follow-up evaluations. But the fact that it was never even reported during the game and it was implied that he could have returned at any time made us think that this was just a minor injury for McCaffrey. Now the hope is that he gets better in the offseason and really is able to put these 2 years behind him.
Really tough times for Christian McCaffrey right now, who signed a contract to make him the richest NFL running back ever before the 2020 season. As we've talked about, he has basically become one of the least available running backs in that time, as he has finished, just 5 games with Matt Rule as his head coach. Started and finished 5 games. So looking ahead, what it means. We're going to put Chuba Hubbard back on the waiver wire board. And there are some limiting factors here. Chuba Hubbard was not great filling in for Christian McCaffrey. Moreover, Chuba Hubbard now has some competition for targets in Amir Abdullah. That being said, I do think that when you're looking for the best option to fill in at running back, I think I'm going to, most cases, take the guy who's got the best chance at 15 or 18 carries per game, even if it comes along with just 1, 2, or 3 targets in a game. So I'm going to go Chuba Hubbard, Matthew. I look at him as like a solid flex option, maybe even a low-end RB2, depending on how some things shake out with injuries this week. But Chuba Hubbard is the next man up in this backfield.
Yeah, I think it's just worth noting, though, a couple of things. I'm glad you mentioned Amir Abdullah, who they're using in the passing game here. So they're on a bye this week. So you're not getting Hubbard this week.
Yeah, it's limited.
They come back next week. After that, in week 14, they play Atlanta at home. Okay, good
Easy
matchup. That's a pretty good matchup. Pretty good matchup against the Falcons. But then after that, they're at Buffalo. You don't love that. They're home to Tampa Bay. You don't love that.
No, thanks.
They're at New Orleans. You don't love that. And then if you play in week 18, they're once again at Tampa Bay. So after the Atlanta game, they have 4 straight games against basically 3 top 5 defenses in run defense. Right? The Saints, the Bills, and the Bucks are among the best run defenses in the NFL for a guy that, to your point, averaged 12.3 fantasy points per game when he filled in for McCaffrey earlier. Like, he was running back 23 on a points per game basis. Like, he was a flex play with easier schedule and didn't have Cam Newton as his quarterback, who is also, somebody that is a threat to vulture touchdowns at the goal line. He's going to be a starting running back in the NFL. He has value in fantasy. But I am less, to me, I wouldn't go crazy trying to get Chuba Hubbard on the waiver wire. That is my take there on that. And by the way, it's not for this show, but at some point we're going to talk about the long-term value of Christian McCaffrey. Like, what do you do in Dynasty? Because the argument about Christian McCaffrey coming out of college, no one ever questioned his talent, but they're like, he's a smaller guy. Is he going to withstand the beating in the NFL? Well, then the first couple of years, you're like, we were all wrong. Not we all, but the draft nicks that said, I think he went 7th overall to the Panthers that year, 8th. And, some of the people that analyzed drafts were like, that's too high a pick for a guy that's small. And then, of course, he's been awesome. And people were like, we were all wrong. And now maybe they were right. Yeah. I don't know. It's 1 year, what are you going to do? But 2 years, to your point, he's played 5 games for Matt Rule from start to finish.
It's not been pretty. Let's keep things moving here, and we move from running backs to wide receivers. And I saw this stat from Mike Clay, who is the 23rd highest scoring wide receiver in terms of total points this year. The answer is Kendrick Bourne of the New England Patriots, who this past week had a pair of touchdowns, much to the chagrin of Stephania because she was making a difficult decision between Kendrick Bourne and Laviska Shenault. We all thrust our support behind Laviska Shenault, and then Kendrick Bourne ends up scoring twice for the Patriots. And I hear all the counter arguments because I think I understand in some ways.
To be clear, I was not asked on this decision.
Okay, you would have gone with Shenault too.
Anyways, I don't know that I would have.
I hear all the counter arguments on Kendrick Bourne, and they are valid. This is more of a deeper league consideration because hasn't had 100 yards in a game this year. The Patriots do spread the ball out quite a bit right now with Mac Jones, and he hasn't had a game with, I believe, more than 5 or 6 catches this season. But what he has had recently is at least 4 catches in 5 of his past 6 games. He's very good after the catch. What I would just say, speaking generally, and I'm not sure that this is a good way to assess fantasy value, but pretty good football player. Pretty nice little player the Patriots have picked up in the passing game. Seems to be having a growing rapport with Mac Jones, and this offense seems to be getting better and better by the week. A potential deeper league consideration at wide receiver.
Yeah, you know where they picked him up from?
Your San Francisco 49ers.
That's right.
You did a great job evaluating
It didn't work out there, but it worked out for him. By the way, Field, I saw some ridiculous next-gen stat that I'm sure I'm going to get wrong, but like his second touchdown apparently had like a 3% chance of happening.
Yeah, it was a great run.
It was something like it was never supposed to happen.
Yeah, he had like 5 guys around him at one point. That's one of those that you feel like is
chance. That's just to stab me in the heart.
Oh, that's gonna be one of those like those AWS commercials they always do. Like like they're gonna look at he had a 3% chance, and then Kendrick Bourne's gonna look at the camera and say, "Stat that." Because that's something players say all the time.
Totally, of course.
Right. It's a common phrase. You hear it all the time in locker rooms. Anyway, and so, right. But anyway, 3% chance. Kendrick Bourne. I'm kind of buying into Kendrick Bourne a little bit. I got to be honest with you. I'm buying into it.
Yeah, good football player. They have a tough test on Monday night with the Buffalo Bills. We'll see what the Bills secondary looks like. It's his first game. It's their first full game without Tre'Davious White. They played on Thursday night. Part of the game, obviously, he got hurt during that game against New Orleans. We all know. Saints passing offense right now not up to the caliber of the Patriots. Let's get to one more waiver wire ad. And this is my forward-thinking ad of the week. And maybe I'm trying too hard to make this one happen, but I believe in the talent. and it's Kadarius Toney. The last time we saw him had 7 catches for 40 yards. Stephania, the problem was that was 2 weeks ago because he didn't play this past week. What's he dealing with?
He didn't. He has a quad strain, and he was listed as doubtful. So I'm going to take a little bit of kernel of hope for you in the fact that they didn't rule him out entirely. They left the door slightly ajar. So if he has a better week of practice, who knows? Maybe we'll get him back.
Would love to see him back. It's an electric player right now. I know the Giants offense, contrary to popular belief, did not get fixed just by getting rid of Jason Garrett as their offensive coordinator, but they need to score more points. And the best way to do that, one thing we have heard as a consistent message from the Giants is that part of making this coordinator switch is prioritizing their top playmakers. That means Kenny Golladay. That means Saquon Barkley. That means Kadarius Toney. Perhaps that means Sterling Shepard as well. I also hear you that there are a ton of wide receivers right now in New York. You got a lot of mouths to feed. But right now, if you look at that offense and you're asking an opposing coordinator, which guy scares you the most? I think the answer is Kadarius Toney. So this is a little bit of a wishful thinking waiver wire ad right now because there really wasn't an obvious, you got to add him wide receiver this week, in my opinion.
I will say that I do, and I see him up on the board behind us here, but Van Jefferson, I do think is really interesting. He's available more than 50% of ESPN leagues, and so I was encouraged by his usage against the Packers. They're going to go 3 wide. They're going to go 3 wide
play
quite
every
a bit.
Snap. He's got 36 targets in his past 5 games, does Van Jefferson. The difference between him, as an example, just to juxtapose them, Kendrick Bourne, over the last 5 games, catching like 86% of his targets. Whereas Van Jefferson, of those 36 targets, I think it's like 15 catches, right? So he is, but what's the difference between those two players? Van Jefferson's average depth of target is like 80 yards down the field, right? Like he is their deep threat. So the good news is he can be your Deshaun Jackson on your roster where he might get you, 3 catches for 102 yards and a touchdown. You just have to be prepared for the possibility they also get you 3 catches for 32 yards and no touchdowns, which, you got to be able to live with the good and the bad when it comes to somebody like Van Jefferson in your fantasy lineup. That's what we have for the waiver wires here. We've got just a few minutes left. Go check out the column.
I have to add one thing. Kevin Pulsifer chiming in again. It was a 0.3% chance.
0.3? Wow.
0.3% chance of a touchdown for Kendrick Bourne in that second touchdown of the last game.
So Pulsifer did actually, in fact, stat that.
He did stat that.
There's one person that would stat
Do you think
that.
he said that out loud when he did it?
Kyle and Pulsifer.
He might have said, I'm going to stat that.
I'm going to stat
probably
that.
Yeah.
Stat that.
All right.
Indeed.
Can I ask you guys a question?
So anyway, and by the way, more names available on Field's column. Be sure to check it out on ESPN.com.
Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Jalen Waddle has been really good the last couple of weeks.
He has been.
Can I just ask if you think this is for real? Has he started to fall into more of what he is going to be? Or is this hey, man, he's a rookie, getting things figured out for a couple of weeks, but don't expect this to continue rest of the season?
I'll 100% real. Let's keep in mind, remember, I don't know that I heard anyone that was higher on Jalen Waddle in the preseason than Field Yates. He was like, this is one of my guys. I am standing on the countertop. This is a kid that is going to be very, very special. And so you add the talent. We all agree on the talent. The role, I mean, he's obviously getting a tremendous amount of targets. He's basically like the only healthy pass catcher, but also give credit where credit is due. Tua has played well. Tua is completing a high percentage of his passes. They are using Jalen Waddle in the right way. They're using him close to the line of scrimmage. I think this is completely legitimate. Field, listen, great call by you on Waddle as somebody to target late in drafts, and he's paid off handsomely.
Got 77 catches right now. Interesting question. I don't think it matters. I'd just be curious. Like, if you had the opportunity, you have Jamar Chase in the War Room League. Stephania has Jalen Waddle. If you had the opportunity to acquire Jalen Waddle for Jamar Chase, would you do it or no? Like, which one of those 2 rookie wide receivers possesses the most value for the rest of the season?
I think I would probably stick with Jamar Chase. It's a great question.
Big play
it's
upside,
a great
right?
question. Big play upside. I prefer Burrow and the Bengals than Tua and the Dolphins. But it's a conversation.
Yeah, it is.
Right? And I think that there's probably more upside with Chase, but probably more of a floor with Waddle. I mean, Chase just came off this bad game. Bengals seem to be going more run heavy. I also have Joe Mixon in the War Room League. So I'm kind of all in on the Bengals, which maybe I could diversify my risk a little bit. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, both of them
Stefania's
have
hard
been
to
really
trade with,
good.
though. So that's part of, so it's like, you
Well,
are.
both
She drives
players-
a tough bargain.
Both players have been exceptional
Imagine
this
that.
year.
Imagine that. I don't always make trades with you that are better for you than me.
I know.
Wow,
If you
funny
were a
how
good
that
friend,
works.
that's what you would do.
Hey, we got to
Very
get moving
upsetting to
here.
me.
We have to get moving here, but I do want to remind you guys one more time. Fantasy Football Now this Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN's YouTube page, on ESPN's Twitter page, on the ESPN app, on the ESPN Fantasy Facebook page. Am I forgetting anything? Matthew will be live streaming on his own TikTok page. Please join us.
Absolutely.
We'll have a
It's
lot of what
everywhere
you're used
but
to.
TV,
Yeah,
basically.
a lot of the stuff that you're used to, with a couple of cool curveballs mixed in as well. We are making the most of the situation one time and one time only. Be sure to check us out on that.
Did you know that all of Fantasy Focus is going to be on Fantasy Football Now this Sunday?
So let's see.
So Mike Clay.
Matthew,
Are Al
Stefania.
Seinfeld? Are we getting Al Seinfeld?
All right.
Tell me more.
You know what? You guys are so mean. I'm going to be excited for my first time on Fantasy Football.
What are you waiting?
Yes! We're going to have Daniel.
We're having Daniel on this show?
That's
Yeah.
Oh, man. It's
Now
gonna
you
be
know the ratings
excellent.
are going to go through the roof. We're going
What are
we're
you
going to
doing
crash
on this
the
show?
internet.
Well, Matthew, there's no commercials, so they needed more nipples for some of that time for you guys to get a break.
Is that
That's
the
where I come
equation?
in.
There you go. Great stuff.
Yeah.
We cannot wait to have Daniel on. If that doesn't get you to tune into the show on Sunday, nothing will. We'll be back on Wednesday with the latest on injury news, anything else that might come up. In the meantime, for Matthew and Stefania and Daniel, I am Field. We'll talk to you guys then.
Hail to the Washington football team. Peace out.
Go Niners.
You don't.